We have a guest on today's episode. We're going to be talking about rent control out in California. Our guest is Andres Segovia, who is not only a property manager, but also an investor and a broker out in California. And he's in the LA area. And he's giving his insights on what he's seen since rent control has been introduced statewide in California as of January 1st, 2020. The fallout, so to speak, the pros and cons of what's going on out there. I thought it'd be interesting to have him on the podcast. He actually is a client of Rent Prep, and he reached out. And I said, hey, why don't you come on the podcast? Tell us what you see going on out there. Give us some of your insights. And you'll see that I kind of just let Andres just kind of run the show on this episode. I did a great job of breaking down some of the laws, some of the things that I wasn't familiar with rent control in California, but also why, if you're in another state, that you may be interested in what's going on out there, as that may trickle down to your state or even on a federal level.
For those that are not familiar with rent control is, it's a rent cap. And you can only increase rent on a schedule that, in this case, like the city, for example, because they're the ones that really control and set these things up. They issue a calendar or a schedule that how much of a rent you can increase. At 2 or 3%, it tends to be the average norm.
And but for the state of California, what is it, 5%?
It's capped at...
I think I read it's capped at a total of 10, right? But it's
5% cap plus the consumer price index. So whatever inflation is, and the numbers being thrown out 3%. So this year people can raise it up to 8% max.
Yeah.
The state law is basically like just the basis. LA is super strict. So to give an example of what rent control truly is, that's why I turned to LA, because that's the sample, the strongest example that anybody can have. It's not just a cap. It's also that multiple bureaucratic departments get involved in your property. You have the Department of Building and Safety. That's usually called upon by the housing department. The housing department is the one that basically is overseeing your property, because they want to make sure that you are maintaining your unit to health and safety standards that have people living in them. So they do an annual inspection to the property.
Yeah.
They tend to send notices, but there are surprise inspections too. So the landlord pays for those inspections, and the landlord has to register every single year that unit is a rental unit. So it's kind of like a business registration to that extent. And on top of that, there's a business tax associated with that. So those are three things that are associated with in this whole rent stabilization ordinance or rent control. That's the thing, that we don't know who the inspectors tend to be, and and most of these are not building inspectors. So they go and they have an opinion, for example, of a doorknob. It says, this doorknob's illegal. I need you to change it. You have a citation. Here's a fee. Get it fixed and get the Department of Building and Safety to sign off on this. Then the Department of Building and Safety would go out there and say, this doorknob is fine. You can't replace for the other one because that other doorknob is illegal. So we take that notice, go to the housing department, and the housing department said, no, we told you what we want.
Is this a true story, or is this an example?
I'm giving you an example of what we had to deal with. This was last year.
Yeah.
So this was last year.
It sounds so ridiculous. I'm wondering if you were just, coming up with a story on the top of your head, or that's something you actually had to deal with.
No, but I do have the this one I dealt with, but I also have the address, not my property, that I actually dealt with with my father, who's a contractor of our construction business, that we dealt together in East Los Angeles. I remember the address all the time. I'm not going to rattle it off, but it was a case that lasted about 18 months. It was a bank-owned property. It was about 4 units. There was a lot of issues there because of the tenants had their own attorneys. And there is something called a REAP program. This thing sounds weird. It says Rental Escrow Account Program. Basically, it's the tenants going on strike. I'm not paying you the rent. So this REAP program defends the tenants from having to pay the rent. So during those 18 months, these tenants didn't pay one dime to the bank because they supposedly were paying the bank. And in the meanwhile, we had housing and building and safety at each other's throats. Both of this is the city of Los Angeles, the Department of Building and Safety of Los Angeles, and the Los Angeles Housing Department. That's not even to say the community department, which is sometimes involved too. It's like the flip. What is all this? Pure bureaucracy. It lasted 18 months because none of these morons would talk to each other. And we were tasked to be brought in to try to alleviate this issue. So we did get it resolved. Took 18 months, but it did get resolved. And the thing is, you had REAP defending the tenants against the greedy landlord, in this case being the bank, and hating on us, the construction company and the property managers, because we were in league with the greedy 1% they saw. And your building and safety, who these guys just didn't care, like one way or another, because they were fining and giving citations every single time. Mm-hmm. If something is not resolved in a timely manner, the Department of Building and Safety can escalate the case to code enforcement, which is above that in the Department of Building and Safety. If code enforcement, if you don't comply with them by a certain case or a certain time frame, they can do what is called a substandard. It's a condemnation of the property. You can't do anything with it, and it's just short of eminent domain. The ones that can do eminent domain is the housing department, because if you fail to comply, that means you, the landlord, were not being responsible for the property, and you were not taking care of the tenants. So therefore, you lost all rights to the property. You get no rent, and housing takes over, aka the government takes over your property. That is Los Angeles in a nutshell.